before I begin, I want to thank Dr. Hawes and the College of Arts and Sciences Honors Program for inviting me here to speak. I've really enjoyed getting to know some of the students, both my fellow co-presenters and the students in Dr. Spangler's Camino class. And I'm feeling extra lucky to be invited back to speak, considering that the last time I gave a research presentation here in the Harper Center for Honors Day in 2011, I was wearing a t-shirt, hiking pants, and a smelly backpack that had been sweated on for a month. In all seriousness, I give this program and its emphasis on broad, person-centered inquiry across disciplines all the credit for making me who I am today, and I'm delighted to be back to share with you this evening. When you think of the humanities, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Old leather-bound books? Dead old white guys? Professors in shabby suits talking to you about old leather-bound books written by dead old white guys? That was one impression I had when I was in your shoes as a student here at Creighton, when I was assigned to read Augustine's Confessions no fewer than 3 times. In my own field, early modern Spanish literature, our claim to fame is Miguel de Cervantes' Don Quixote, the quintessential leather-clad tome penned by a deceased fellow. You could be forgiven, I think, if reading old books was your impression of the humanities. Yet today, I want to think about different ways of engaging with the humanities. Specifically, I want to talk about pilgrimage. Yes, the literal walking to a shrine, but also something more metaphorical. I'll tell you the story of my own various wanderings across Spain, but also the story of how those experiences have ultimately led me to humanistic inquiry, both the traditional kind involving old books and the kind involving asking human questions about myself and my place in the world. Ultimately, I hope we'll come to an understanding of the humanities that reconciles the two by focusing on the human questions behind the humanities. Let's start with literal pilgrimage. It worked. The Camino de Santiago, or Way of St. James, was one of the 3 most prominent medieval pilgrimage routes, along with the roads to Rome and Jerusalem. All roads in this case lead to Santiago de Compostela, the Cathedral of Santiago in northwestern Spain, which houses the remains of St. James the Greater, the Apostle of Jesus. Since the 1980s, the route has experienced incredible resurgence, now regularly attracting 200,000 pilgrims on foot each year. I myself have made 5 such journeys on different routes, becoming something of a Camino aficionado. I've walked by myself, with my dad and my brother, taken students, and even had a Camino honeymoon. While Christians routinely make pilgrimage by train, plane, and automobile to Rome, Lourdes, Fatima, and Guadalupe, what sets the Way of St. James apart is its emphasis on el camino, the way, as an essential component of many pilgrims' visit to the shrine. Modern pilgrims make a journey at once reflective of our times and yet so distinct from our daily life. Walking 15, maybe 20 miles a day through the dust and the mud, the rain and the sun, sometimes all at the same time, you meet friends from Spain, Korea, the Netherlands, Australia, who greet and walk alongside you during the day, and at night help you doctor your blisters and share with you the bad Spanish beer and the good Spanish wine. You develop a routine. Wake before dawn, silently dress, follow the yellow arrows, stop for coffee, get your pilgrim passport stamped, eat, attend the occasional mass, pack for the next day, and sleep. Until finally, one day, you see the bell towers of the cathedral over the horizon and know that you've made it to journey's end. You wind through the maze of the medieval streets and arrive at the Pilgrim Welcome Office at the cathedral, only to take part in that quintessential modern rite of passage. You wait in a long line for the clerks to get through hundreds of pilgrims that arrive before you. When your turn comes, you approach the high desk and the church bureaucrat hands you a form to fill out. Name, hometown, point of departure, pretty straightforward, and then at the bottom, pilgrimage motivation, with 3 boxes, religious and others, or the very specific others. If you check the box the church wants you to, they give you the fancy certificate, La Compostela, with your name Latinized, and that in a holy year confers the pilgrim the possibility of a plenary indulgence. Yes, those still exist today. If you can't show enough devotion, i.e. you check the other motivations box, they give you the honorable mention, the euphemistically titled Certificate of Welcome, written in Spanish and certainly not entitling the holder to an indulgence. On my first Camino journey, when I was a sophomore at Creighton, I didn't know what to make of this last question. As I stood there at the counter, my pen hovering indecisively over the 3 boxes, I thought back to an encounter at a Trappist monastery that I'd had just a week earlier. Cue the dream sequence. A small door invited me into the pilgrims' quarters, a cavernous dungeon hall with arched stone ceilings, rows and rows of bunk beds lining the walls, and a giant wooden slab table running the length of the middle. Energy-saving light bulbs hung from metal torch brackets on the wall. I pondered the anachronism as I unpacked my gear in the half-light they provided. "Primitivo, primitivo," my German friend commented to me, and I hadn't even seen the bathroom yet. Later that afternoon, a few of us went for a tour of the monastery. The eccentric brother Luis doted on us, treating us pilgrims like celebrities on a VIP tour of the winding hallways and cloisters, spiral staircases, and the silent, dark church. Near the end of the visit, as if from nowhere, Luis quipped, "You know, our religion of ritual doesn't matter to people anymore. The religion of the Camino has replaced it. People hiking, sacrificing their normal lives, reflecting on what's good." I was stunned by this matter-of-fact comment that seemed to disavow, almost mock, the daily life this man had chosen. Luis continued, "It's the new mysticism, the Camino is. Our conception of mysticism is stuck in the 1600s with St. Teresa of Avila. But really, all pilgrims who take time to reflect are the new mystics. And God is still there. That's the important thing." Later at Vespers, we filed into the balcony of the church, waiting in silence until the clock struck 9. At the stroke of the bell, the aging monks began singing from memory in a droning unison as one roughly played the organ. The off-key voices of the 15 monks echoed throughout every corner of the vast, otherwise empty space. The service finished, the lights turned off, and the monks filed out, barely acknowledging their pilgrim guests. Perhaps Brother Luis was right, I thought. Maybe the Camino is the new mysticism. But as I stood there in the pitch-black doorway of the pilgrims' quarters, watching the warm rain fall on the dark monastery graveyard, I wondered, what made those monks keep singing? What makes us keep walking? Back at the counter, with Brother Luis's words resonating inside me, I shrugged my shoulders, quickly checked the religious and others box, and went home happy, with the Latin form granting privileges to Timotheum Michaelum Foster, whoever that is. Yet the banal anticlimax of bureaucratic form-filling at the end of such an epic journey left profound human questions unanswered. The humanities, literature, history, languages, philosophy, art, and music history, theology, are disciplines in which we ask human questions. Traditionally, literature scholars have looked to great books for answers. For example, when we teach Don Quixote, we consider questions like, why did Don Quixote go crazy? Or did he? Why did he try to save damsels that didn't want to be saved and fight monsters that only existed in books? What does this say about a society with an emerging print culture, or about the thin line between reality and fiction? In a sense, this question of what motivated Don Quixote to give up his comfortable life of petty nobility and trade it in for the rigors of knight-errantry is a question not so different from those I'm still asking myself about the Camino de Santiago. Why are people in the modern world making pilgrimages by foot? Why do people leave the comfort of their own homes to experience the dust, the blisters, the rain, rows of snoring pilgrims in hostels, the threat of bedbugs, and the insufferable French people? What in the collective psyche of postmodern Christianity has provoked the attraction to pre-modern forms of transit and human connection? Is the church the ultimate or arbiter of this pilgrimage experience? These, my friends, are questions for the humanities, and looking in old books isn't necessarily going to help us find the answer, although it might. To be sure, there are many humanities questions about pilgrimage that can be answered using old books. The history of the Camino in Spain is particularly interesting due to St. James's place as patron saint of Spain. In iconography and literature, St. James exists in two forms, as pilgrim and as Moor slayer, demonstrating Spain's not-so-peaceful past. The warrior saint is invoked throughout Spanish history against the Moors, against indigenous Americans, against Spaniards by indigenous Americans, against communists during the Spanish Civil War, and even against buffalo by bison hunters on the American Great Plains. I've even found Santiago adopted as the patron saint of an African kingdom of Congo in the 1600s. These more traditional humanities projects ask questions about what the image of Santiago has meant to people across places and times. What made this religious symbol so adaptable to changing political and cultural climates? What role does the warrior saint play today in the modern pilgrimage? Asking these kind of questions is easier. It's what we are trained to do. To answer them, we look for clues in old books, write papers about it, and present our works to fellow professors trained to do the same. Yet another strain of Camino research has dealt with questions closer to home, out of the realm of old books and dead authors. When wading into questions of pilgrimage motivation, it quickly becomes clear that pilgrims have incredibly varied, sometimes overlapping motives. While some are primarily motivated by traditional notions of religion, others go for more spiritual renewal or even secular personal development, like getting over a bad breakup. Some are motivated by a sense of physical challenge or appreciation of nature, while others seek intercultural encounters and escape from nature, or routine, I should say. In the attempt to make sense of this human landscape, I've looked through newsletters of pilgrimage organizations, comparing Spanish and American attitudes. I've also looked at guestbook entries from pilgrim hostels to see what motivations are important to pilgrims while they're in the middle of their journey. This kind of project is a bit messier. In researching modern pilgrim motivations using materials gathered on my own pilgrimages, I can't help but want to insert my own experiences as evidence. The question shifts from why do modern people go on pilgrimage to why do I go on modern pilgrimage? What did my encounter with Brother Luis mean? Did I check the right box? Is that even the right question? This shift in thinking has helped me to realize that my humanities brain can help answer questions beyond Don Quixote and other old books. For along the way, I began to realize that it's not really the answers to the question that is the most important part. Yes, it's become a cliche, but in pilgrimage, as in the humanities, the journey really is the destination. Let me tell you, it's not a cliche when you're at mile number 450, nor is it when you finish a research paper that you feel proud of. Just as there's no neat answer to the question of why we go on pilgrimage, we're never going to come to a definitive consensus on any of the big questions in the humanities. Why, like Augustine, are humans tempted to do things we know are wrong? Why, like Don Quixote, do we feel bound within the society's conventions of truth and storytelling? Asking questions of old books hones our thinking to ask questions about ourselves, not out of narcissism, but with an eye towards ethical, compassionate existence in society. We go in search of the answers to these questions, but the important part is the search, having the curiosity to ask the questions in the first place, and let them influence our words and deeds. Now, as an added benefit, the drive to ask personal human questions allows for opportunities to engage others in the search. With the digital humanities, for example, we have unprecedented ability to share our work with broad audiences. For example, I've made a website prototype of a map of roadside folk shrines on the Camino, pop-up offerings to the saints or to fallen pilgrims. I hope to have it live soon. There's also the possibility of engaging with what we call the public humanities. For example, I've been invited to talk at local chapter meetings of the American Pilgrims on the Camino organization to lead a discussion about what to expect from pilgrimage journey. These opportunities allow us to bring the human questions from the humanities out of our office or classroom. They can help people understand not just what we do in the humanities, but also how we can use the power of the humanities in our own lives. And yes, old authors can come along for the ride. Mark your calendars for May 7th if you're going to be in Amarillo, Texas. I'll be leading a great books discussion about Don Quixote at the Southwest Public Library branch at 7 o'clock p.m. Whether the questions be about Don Quixote or about our own lives and place in the world, humanistic inquiry can make the biggest impact when we learn to constantly ask questions of the world around us. It is in this sense that I see my own journey through the humanities as a kind of pilgrimage. Just as in pilgrimage, we know the destination, although free inquiry in pursuit of truth is not quite as concrete as the Cathedral of Santiago. We may not all have all the answers about how to get there, or even why we are going, but the important thing is that we make a pilgrimage of knowledge of sorts, to ask the question, generate theories, and to keep searching for the truth. Thank you.